Thank you, Mr. Daggett, for meeting with me today.
Thank you.
Would you please give us a little background about yourself for our listeners and viewers?
Sure. Long-time New Jersey resident, born and raised here, lived my whole life here. Have a doctorate in education. Served in government for 8 years that correspond to the 8 years that Tom Keene was governor. I served as his deputy chief of staff. Then I went off to the federal government and served for 4 years as a regional administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Back here in the cabinet to be the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. 6 years in an investment firm, Lamy Simon & Sons in Morristown, a family investment firm. And then for the last 14 years or so, I've been involved in what's known as brownfields development, buying, remediating, and redeveloping contaminated properties. I do it on my own account. I advise others who do it, and I'm involved with a remediation firm, actually, where we actually clean up sites. And I sit on about 8 nonprofit boards, so I've been involved in the public, the private, and the nonprofit sectors for about 30 years now.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we're going to start off with a series of questions. Let's start with the hot topic nowadays, corruption.
Sure.
As we've been reminded in recent news with the FBI sting that netted 44 elected public officials and religious leaders, New Jersey has been long plagued by political corruption. Over the last decade alone, nearly 150 of the state senators, mayors, county executives, and council members have been arrested and charged with fraud, extortion, and taking kickbacks. Governor Corzine, in a statement regarding Operation Bid-Rig, claimed any corruption is unacceptable anywhere, anytime, by anybody. And his website notes he signed executive orders that toughen financial disclosure requirements, reformed contracting and governance at the independent state authorities, and closed loopholes in state pay-to-play laws. Yet he is publicly admitting to not having prior knowledge of any improprieties by elected officials or the FBI investigation, and many feel this will most certainly impact his run for re-election. Others feel he should be held accountable personally as this occurred on his watch. If elected governor, how will you combat corruption and ensure our state has more honest, open, and accountable officials?
Well, let me say a couple of things, if I may. First, the events of the past week or two are shameful, they're disgraceful, they should make every one of us angry. It's just unacceptable behavior. We unfortunately have a culture of corruption that occurs in a number of places in New Jersey, and we need to do everything we can to stop that. And I think to do that, we have several things. First, it's not just the corruption that occurs outside the law, which is what a lot of law enforcement people work on, but it's the culture of corruption that occurs under the cover of law. In other words, things that are illegal, pension padding, dual office holding, any number of things that make people start to game the system in order to get something out of it that they shouldn't get out of it. So we need to be very aggressive in our efforts on that. And unfortunately, this whole problem is within both parties. It's Republican, it's Democrat. If we haven't had in the last couple of weeks evidence that more than ever we need somebody who's not beholden to special interest, not worried about party ideology, and not focused only on the next election. We really need an independent in the governor's office. This is it, and that's one of the reasons I'm running, is because I feel so strongly about this issue. We cannot continue in this kind of a culture. We need to send a new message to people across New Jersey, and that's what I intend to do.
Thank you. Let's talk about environment. As a state's former DEP commissioner, you have been an advocate for many environmental issues. Christie's plan calls for installing solar farms at each of the state's 800 active and closed landfills. What do you see as the DEP's greatest accomplishments, strengths, and where do you see room for improvement?
Well, the strengths are that we have a long history in New Jersey of very aggressive environmental protection. We lead the nation in many respects in our laws protecting our water, our air, our land, and so historically DEP has done a terrific job in that regard, and much to the credit of many people in government that have made DEP that strong. Where the weaknesses are is, unfortunately, over the years, DEP's capacity has been cut significantly, so that now instead of 4,000 employees when I was at the DEP, there's 3,000 employees 20 years later, and yet we've still had increasing number of regulations, increasing number of laws. We need to give DEP the tools to make them more efficient, and a lot of them have to do with some simple things, like giving them the technical capacity to allow applications for permits and decision-making to occur more electronically than they do now, so that we can submit products online and get responses online instead of doing it all through paper exchanges. We need to make sure that the DEP is organized well enough to be able to give quick answers, and quicker answers, I should say, than they do now. It's just simply not acceptable to have a decision take 2 or 3 years sometimes to occur in the department, and which occurs too often, you're right. So we need to make sure that we can get that kind of decision-making improved, and that's to improve the permit efficiency of the DEP. I chaired a task force last year on behalf of Governor Corzine to do just that, and I managed to get a wide range of people from the most ardent environmentalists in New Jersey to some of the most active builders and developers in New Jersey, and many public and private officials in between. There were 24 of them, and I managed to get them to unanimously agree on how to fix the permit efficiency of the DEP. We need to get them to implement, the DEP to implement all of those recommendations, which I believe that they've been making a real effort to do. But those are the kinds of things we need to do. And in addition, as we do it, we need to continue to promote new alternative energy sources and green technology and the sorts of things that are associated with the new economy. But we have to make sure the DEP functions well in order to do that, and that's why I focus on really the operations of the department.
And let's talk about regulation. You talk about making New Jersey competitive. In particular, you point to reforming the regulatory climate. Can you talk a little bit about what specific reforms you think could be implemented immediately?
Sure. Unfortunately, reforming regulatory problems is never immediate. It will probably take several years at best to really get on top of things, but I think we have to focus on a couple of things. First, we have an enormous number of rules and regulations, many of which are overlapping, they're conflicting, they work at cross purposes with one another, and it occurs not just in the DEP, it occurs in transportation, it occurs in community affairs, it occurs in health and education. We need to overhaul the regulatory system in New Jersey by doing a complete rules review. Mayor Bloomberg in New York managed to overhaul the New York City construction code. People thought that was one of the most Byzantine codes they've ever seen in their lives, but he figured out how to make it work better. We can do the same thing in New Jersey, and we need to. And there's another issue about those regulations that's important to think about. When we have such overlapping and burdensome regulatory system, and it occurs at all levels, whether it's local level, county level, state level, when we have those kinds of things happen, it extends and extends and extends the time process for someone to get a decision out of government as to whether they can build something, whether they can clean up something, whatever it happens to do, whether they can get a road permit. When all those things take that kind of time and that kind of effort, and it extends over a long period of time, it breeds the kind of corruption we talked about earlier, where people get very frustrated and they say, maybe if I just talk to that official on the side, or maybe if I offer him or her some sort of remuneration of some kind, for some sort of money associated with helping me get that approval, things will work better. That adds to the culture of corruption when everything just takes so long. So we need to fix the regulatory process so we can make quicker decisions. And that's just an important part of this. Now, another thing I need to emphasize on the whole regulatory system and with this culture of corruption, I want to emphasize one important thing that often goes by the boards here. We have an enormous number of honest, hardworking public officials at all levels of government. We really do. Despite the amount of corruption we've seen and the talk about it recently, we're not as corrupt as people think. I mean, we have a lot of things are being done very well by people who work hard every day. But there is this underlying problem that we need to address, and we need to be focused on it hard. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we shouldn't have a broad sweep of indicting all public officials, because many of them are hardworking.
Unfortunately, most of it stems from Hudson County.
Well, I don't think most of it really stems from Hudson County. We've seen examples, frankly, all over the state. And we've seen it with Republicans and Democrats, as I've said. It's not limited to one party, which again is the reason we have to focus on getting people in office that aren't beholden to special interests, aren't focused on just the next election, and aren't worried about party ideology. So again, that's why I'm running as an independent.